I'm recording. Okay, good evening. This is November 18th. We are meeting the Valley Stream Book Club, and the book we're discussing today is called Tilda Is Visible, and we have our guest author, Jane Tara, here. Um, she's she's very gracious to fit us in because she's got a very busy schedule. So I hope that you were able to pick up her book and read it. She's going to tell us a little about herself and how she's written many books. So why is this one more unique than the others? Okay, whatever. Okay, so here we go, and I'm going to pin her. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Hi. So I'm not quite sure how these work. Do we do a Q&A or do you just want me to
I
rattle
would
on?
skip. I would give you a couple of minutes, and then they
Yeah.
could ask Q&A. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So my name's Jane Tara. I'm actually speaking to you from Sydney today, where it is now because we've had time difference and everything. We've got 11:30 a.m. So and it's not a background behind me. It's the real thing, and you might see like a lot of colourful birds coming onto the fence, or maybe even a kookaburra. I have a kookaburra that comes in right behind me, so I've closed the door so they don't fly in. But anyway, I'm the author of Tilda Is Visible, and that's the Australian version of it, and that's the US version of it, the covers. I do love this. I love them both, but that's really sweet. I love what they did with the cover of the US version. And they've got some slight differences to the two versions, but I was just absolutely thrilled to be published in the US with Tilda. It was a long time coming. I've been writing for decades, making a kind of basic living from being a writer of children's educational books and some romances and a lot of freelance writing. Single mum, so writing for rent, I call it. And I had this idea for many years that I initially wrote into a short story in another book, and then always wanted to develop this woman, Tilda, who was becoming invisible. And we had some very long lockdowns in Australia, and my sons were older. I had this extra time because we were in these lockdowns, and I finally wrote the book that I wanted to write, the book for me rather than the book just to, support my kids. So it has been an absolute gift that it has resonated with women all over the world. Really sorry, you're going to hear my dog. Can you hear him barking? Yeah. I've got a very big rescue dog who chases birds. So I've been very, very blessed actually with Tilda and the reception to Tilda all over the world. I call her she. She's rolling out all around the world in different countries at the moment, just published in Italy, and next is Germany, and then so on, several other territories around the world. And I guess so I've been talking about her for a couple of years now because she was published in 2024 in Australia, February 2024. And I guess what I have come to realize through doing so many events is that there is a sort of an archetypical story there in Tilda that resonates with women no matter where they are in the world, and that Tilda's story, which was very much my own story, well, inspired by my own life story, it made me realize that my story is not that unique. So that it's actually one that, so many women share. Yeah.
You also
Yeah.
say now it's being published elsewhere. I think it's because that it's an international story.
That's
Women,
right.
right?
Yes, that's right. And I never expected that kind of, it's in publishing, they call it a unicorn, and I never expected that. It's being published in places like Turkey, France or the Spanish territories. So it's very in quite sort of different cultural spaces, and yet it's resonating with women everywhere. And what I love is that the women who are championing this story, the editors and so on, are all women, sort of over, well, definitely over 40. A lot of them are over 50. And they've read this, resonated with it, and they have the opportunity to share a story and publish a story in their own countries, um, written by an older woman as well, and for older women. And I think it is sort of that time now where, and I don't know what it's like in the US, but I think it's the same. I found that around the time Tilda was published in Australia, that that there were several authors, all in the same age bracket or older, who were publishing their own books here. And we did a few events together and very much supported each other in that space of sharing sort of older women's stories.
You know, I almost laughed when you said you don't know if it's like this in the United States because it is very
Sorry,
like,
my son is going to take my dog away. Sorry, thank you.
well, I hope not
Sorry,
forever.
Susan, if you could just repeat that.
It's very much like that in the United States, and the gradual and sometimes not so gradual invisibility of women as they get older. It's bad enough when you're young,
Mm,
but it's definitely the case when you get older.
mm,
I thought that was, I just love your use of the surrealistic, real invisibility
mm,
coming in. I thought that was fabulous, and it really added a lot to the book. Um,
mm. Do you know, I've had a couple of women come up to me at events who have actually said that they Googled invisibility to see if it was a real thing. And I was like, really? But I guess it is real for a lot of women. And certainly when I was sitting with it and working with invisibility, I knew that there were so many ways to go, and we can talk about society and why. And I'm still invisible for those reasons, those
yes.
societal reasons. If I go out I was at the pharmacy, the chemist, we call it here, the just recently, and I was standing there waiting to be served, and the pharmacist kind of finished serving someone. And then this guy walked up and he turned to him and he said, "Can I help you?" And I went, "What am I, invisible?" And then I started to laugh um, and looked really crazy. So all of those are still in place. But the difference for me is that I went through the journey that Tilda goes on, where I addressed my thoughts and perceptions about myself, and those changed. So I feel that I'm now very visible to myself, and if someone else can't see me, that's really not a problem. Whereas before, I was feeling quite overwhelmed by not being seen, not being heard. For me, that started in the home as well, in a relationship, a blended family situation where I was raising four boys, and just that was my sort of invisibility starting point. And then I realized that I was taking that out into the world as well. And it's easy to point the finger at him or that situation, but actually he was enabling something much deeper in me, which I had to address, and that was going back to my childhood. And so this is what I've written about in Tilda, and it was not easy to do because I finished the first draft and read it and thought, why are people going to be interested in this? Like, and there's actually, I think it might be, oh no, it might be Michael Robotham. He's an Australian author. Has a sign on his wall, and it says "Make them care," and he always refers to that sign. It's sort of each point of the writing process. And I was thinking, oh, why will people care about this? It was very much removed from me, and it was this woman. It was kind of a cute story, but the whole, like a whole book, why would people care about that? And here I am in lockdown. I was meditating a lot, and I realized I needed to step into the story myself, rather than keep Tilda at a distance. I needed to sort of really become her, actually, and write about my own personal experiences with childhood trauma, domestic violence, the sort of the ripple effect of that through your life and through relationships and through the way that you perceive yourself. And so I did that. And that's when this character Pearl came into the process, and I started to write about Tilda's inner world, and it was very much mine. And I finished the book and read it and went, oh my God, I can't show anyone. I was working in the book industry at that time and knew everyone at all the different publishers in Australia. And I thought, oh, they're going to read this and think I'm absolutely mad. So I put it away for 6 months. And then I spoke to a couple of book industry friends about it, and a couple of these friends, and one in particular, she's a best-selling author here in Australia, and she doesn't come across as woo-woo, but she meditates, and she's into sort of neuroplasticity and that type of language. And she read it, was very supportive of me, told me the publisher that would be perfect for me. We call them publishers here in the US, you call them editors. So this particular editor was at the publishing house that was my dream publishing house. And I went, oh, and I'd never met her. And so I sent it to her, and things happened very quickly. And it turned out that people didn't actually think I was crazy. People read the book and the inner workings of Pearl and went, I do that too. I speak to myself in that way, which is great. I didn't feel so like vulnerable, I guess. So I felt incredibly vulnerable. Yeah.
Well, that internal dialogue thing which is often denigrating, is something that's seen in therapy and by psychoanalysts all the time. And I think it's not an unusual thing, and we all do it. It's the nature of the dialogue that changes based on whatever trauma you may or may not have experienced in
Yes.
your earlier life or currently.
Mm,
But
mm,
the thing about you are constantly judging yourself is was now I don't know if Pearl said that or if she thought that her cat said it. There was one line in there where she says you are constantly judging yourself, and she was pretty drunk at the time. Tilda, and
mm,
so maybe she thought the cat said it. I wasn't sure, but I thought that
mm,
was very, very well portrayed, and the whole therapeutic approach of write down everything Pearl says. What does she say? Just
mm,
write it down, just
mm,
get it out there.
mm,
Then analyzing that and see how you feel about that, and talk back, was pretty
exactly.
interesting.
It's
Mm,
interesting sometimes that inner voice is represented by like an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other shoulder.
mm, mm,
And what I found interesting about Tilda and Pearl is that at least once she actually became more self-aware, one was never completely evil and one was never completely good, and they really
mm.
they had to coexist.
Mm, mm. I find, when I was first introduced to my inner dialogue, and I didn't realize I had this until I was in my early 40s. And prior to that, I think I had a perception of myself that I was pretty chilled. And then once that genie is out of the bottle, there's no putting it back. Like when you realize that you have this internal program going and you hear how it speaks to you, it just changes everything. And either you can move forward and actively work at sort of changing that voice, or you can live with it. And it's exhausting to live with it when it is when it's as full on as mine was. And I think that is the human experience. I feel that most of us have programs that need a lot of work. So I now have a program. I mean, no one is ever going to have the full angel on the shoulder. But I love it when you get to that point where there's a bit of both. And when Pearl, and I had to come up with a name for it for the book, but program everything, always repeat loop. I was thinking, what does this do? And that's what it does. So I really love when I hear that internal program be a cheerleader for me without me forcing it. It's, it can be really simple, like God, that was great. You did really well. And it's like, whoa, hold on a minute. That was me telling me that, that it was okay, speaking to myself as I would speak to any of my best friends. And I think that's the aim, to learn to reprogram that, just to be not unrealistically. It's always going to have its moments, but and also they're good too, because it can be a warning of certain things as well. You're in a dialogue, but to speak to you at times with kindness and love, the way that good friends speak to each other, and to be that friend to yourself, I think is the ultimate message in Tilda, really. I want women to read it and to go away and consider how they speak to themselves and how they can be better friends to themselves.
And that it really does have to come from within, because Tilda was very fortunate. She had loving, with the exception of her husband, she had loving, supportive people all around her.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
But she was becoming invisible.
That's right. And I actually made a conscious choice about a lot of the sort of the structure of her life. I wanted her to have that support. It really reflects my life. I have just incredible community around me and beautiful girlfriends. And so I wanted her to have all of that. But then the first draft, she had financial difficulties, and that's something that I'm writing into my current draft, because I find a lot of women after divorce have financial issues. And I had that for Tilda, and then I thought, no, I need to put her in a place of privilege in many ways. To show that even then, those people who you go, but they've got everything, still struggle with this. It's this universal unhappiness, this universal constant development of self while we're here in this life. And so when I started to write Tilda as successful, and that she had money and she owned her house and all of that, that was an uncomfortable space for me. I was like, so that I always say that, writing is a little bit like therapy for me as well. So I was kind of going through the process of going, well, what's my discomfort around this? Why can't she have it all and still be struggling with her childhood and with her life? And with being content. I think, we all sort of talk about happiness, but actually contentment is the thing to aim for, I believe.
It's one of the things that was interesting about Tilda was that she did have such a traumatic childhood, which led to certain repetitive behaviors, which led to invisibility and the denigrating inner dialogue. But I think society itself can push women towards invisibility, even if you've had a good enough childhood, even if
Yes.
you have good enough relationships, you have a decent job, etc. Society itself can make you feel less than as you get older as a woman. And I swear it starts long before you're 40. And I really think that that's the case. So while I appreciated your Tilda's focus on her trauma and on getting through the trauma and working and understanding how it impacted on her life, I also thought that, it's important to keep in mind that a lot of society's structures and strictures do that
Yes.
to us as well. And it doesn't take a god-awful childhood, although Lord knows that doesn't help. It doesn't take a
No.
god-awful childhood to do that.
No, and I agree, but my personal experience is
Yeah.
that to start with, it would have been two different books, and I at that time was on or was starting to emerge from a very long personal journey addressing my own childhood, which was incredibly traumatic, and I know that I've addressed it because now I go out and I can talk about this. And I don't have the emotional triggers around it that I would never have been able to speak about this until my mid to late 40s. So I guess the message that I really wanted to share was that, that trauma in your childhood continues to impact you and your sense of self your entire life until you address it, and that you can address it and you can address it successfully uh, using the methods that I used and that Tilda uses. So that was kind of the core thing, I guess. But the other point there is that I agree totally with you. But whereas before, when I went out and I was invisible, out in public or wherever, it used to really bother me, and I didn't know what to do about it. But now that I've addressed my own internal stuff about my self-perception, the external societal stuff doesn't bother me as much. And in fact, I've ended up being in a place where I get to go out and talk about my age and how we're visible and go out there and kind of embrace the world in a way that I've never had the opportunity to do until now.
Yeah.
And that's only because of the work I've done personally. So working on self for me has been a quicker journey than changing society, but I think there's a balance between the two. I think we can do it internally and still go and sort of help make an impact in the world and show that actually, there's no use by date for women.
Well, my point wasn't that this is only relevant to people who have had childhood trauma. I think
Yeah.
you're absolutely right that even if the basis of your continuing invisibility is
Yeah.
more external than it is internal, you still have to do the internal work so that you can stand up and say, "Excuse me, I am here, and this is who I am," and so on.
Yeah. I agree. And one of the great gifts of Tilda being published is that the initial, I guess, promotional trail was very much the book world and the types of book events that authors do. But I started to get invited to women's events. Keynote speakers or whatever. I've been to so many women's events where I've met women who have had all different types of experiences in life. But as you say, you don't need that sort of childhood trauma to feel a certain way after 50 or even after 40. Because society sets us up for that. So it's been such a gift to be able to talk to women. That's what I've really, really enjoyed, actually, about the whole journey that I've been on.
You may have addressed it, and I did finish the book, but maybe I missed this point. And it was the fact that her mother was always able to see her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did Tilda ever come to any kind of explanation for that?
No, not really. But I think and I think Selma, her therapist, and I mean, I might be wrong because I haven't read Tilda for a while, but Selma also, the world's leading expert in invisibility, wasn't sure. But I guess it's the leaving the reader with the knowledge that you will be seen by someone. There's always going to be someone who sees you or sees you uniquely, I think. And I wrote Tilda's mother. She's very, very different from my mother. My mother's always really seen me and sort of cheerleaders, but so because I was touching on a similar childhood to mine, I killed Tilda's father off early, and that's not the case with my father. I just I have a good relationship with him now that's been built over years, and I didn't want him to be embarrassed when it was published, but he knows. I've had the conversation with him, and then I didn't want the mother to be too much like my own mother, but I feel like my mother has always seen me. But I think there's been moments in my life where unexpected people have seen me. And I guess that's what I was trying to bring into the situation with her mother. I ended up choosing a primary person in Tilda's life for that to happen. But I try and think of an example. I was living in New York, and I've lived in New York twice, but the second time was with my son, who's now 26. He was 2 at the time, and he was feral, absolutely feral. I was by myself in New York. My ex-husband was traveling the country and never sort of at home, for work, not, wasn't out there drinking or anything, but, for work. So I was at home. I didn't know anyone in New York. I was fairly new to living there. I didn't have a kindy or friends or anyone I could drop my kid off at. So and he was pretty feral, and I was in a supermarket once, and we call them umbrella strollers, those collapsible little kind of strollers, and I'd sort of clipped him into that because he was having the tantrum of all tantrums, right?
Yeah.
I was homesick. I was lonely. I needed help. I needed someone to take this kid off my hands for an hour. And I'm standing at the checkout counter at a supermarket with him bellowing and just staring ahead going, I think I'm about to really lose it, but I really need these groceries because there's no food at home. So I'm either going to see this through or not eat. And I was tossing it up. And people were going, oh, just take him out. And, and those looks and everything. And this woman came up to me. I get emotional whenever I talk about her, and I don't even know her name. I wouldn't know her if I fell over her, probably. But she came up to me and she just really looked at me and she said, "You are doing such a great job. You really are. Keep it up." Right? And I was like, thank you, and I'm like, and I got through the register and I got home, and it took one person to see me and to connect with me. And 25 years later, I still talk about her.
Yeah.
So I feel like sometimes we feel like we're completely invisible and that there's no one that sees us. But I think we need to remain open to the possibility that some people do and will.
It's interesting you tell that anecdote because you speak a great deal about the importance of meditation and how it helped Tilda and obviously helped you, et cetera. But one of the basic results of meditation is greater self-acceptance, but that means there is a greater acceptance of other people as well.
Yes.
And and that woman clearly, it generates compassion. It can generate compassion. If you keep at it and you have compassion for yourself, you're going to have compassion for other people because you're going to recognize yourself, your situation, your life, and their lives and their situations. And the woman just demonstrated extraordinary compassion and empathy.
Yes,
How
absolutely.
wonderful that happened.
And it meant the world to me. And, and also I think you pay things forward in life. And so I try and do that. And I always remember her. It's like she taught me that lesson that I do that if I see a mother or a parent struggling with their child. But you're right. I think long-term meditation just kind of neutralizes things. It gives you the space to work out how you're going to respond to something. And initially, when I started meditating, I guess my brain has always been incredibly noisy and melodramatic, and I had a lot of drama in my life and a lot of chaos because that's how I was used to functioning. And when I started meditating, I think one of the things that after a period of time I noticed was an event would happen, and then my reaction to that event, which was normally like those two things went together, there was actually a bit of space in between. It's the only way to describe it. It was like there was this space, and I got to choose how I was going to react instead of just being at the mercy of the external world and reacting to that. So that was kind of something that developed over years, and I really appreciated, and it completely changed my life. But as you say, then there's this, it's almost a neutralizing of attachment to I guess anger or judgment or past events and the way that they happened, and your perception of how events happened. And that has been a more recent change in me. I've got a friend, a dear friend who's Buddhist, and he talks to me about this a lot. And he talks to me about the near and far enemies in Buddhism. Like, you don't want to be apathetic about people. That's kind of, you want to just be able to view things as they are. And I have been able to build a perfect example, I would say, is my relationship with my father is great. even though my childhood was hideous. I have a very solid relationship with him, and I've given him the opportunity to redeem himself. Maybe not so much with me, but certainly with my children. He's a really good grandfather. So they've had an excellent relationship with him, and I kind of keep my relationship separate from that. Even the man who Tom, Tilda's ex-husband, was based on, we kind of were able to really resolve, isn't the right way to describe it, but find a really deep peace around the past and history and just let things go, which was a gift because he passed away a couple of months ago. So, you know, gave me a real plot twist for a sequel, actually. So, as he says, but was said, but yeah. So, but I agree with you. Long-term meditation. I find that my current novel that I'm writing, I find it really difficult to develop the conflict in it, because I don't see conflict in the same way anymore.
I wanted to ask you, you said you have 4 sons, or have you shared your book with them? Have they given you any feedback or
Well, actually, the man who inspired Tom in the book, my ex, when we came together, we both had 2 sons, and his 2 boys don't have a mum, so I raised them. The youngest was 2 and the oldest was 5 when we met, and they sort of slotted into ages with my boys. So there were the 4 boys. That's when I talk about 4 boys. My 2 boys have not read it. They've never read anything that I've written. The youngest stepson hasn't, but my oldest stepson has, actually. He's 21, and I'm very close to both of those boys. But I feel like my older stepson, him and I, there's a lot of parallels with our early childhood, and I feel like I came into his life to sort of be able to support that. But yes, he has read it. He's the only one who read it. Yeah, and his father read it as well, and was very proud of me too. Yeah.
Speaking of men, I'm
Here's
I
a big
was
topic. Yeah.
to narrow it down a little. Something. Have you, when you were writing this book, did you ever think about writing it without her meeting the wonderful man she did end up meeting? I mean, the metaphor of his visual impairment, etc., works,
Yeah.
and it adds to the story. But I kind of was wondering what this book would have been like if she hadn't met somebody who was
Yeah.
you know,
And
print.
I agree. And I actually, so he was in the short story, and I'll go back to his sight impairment with another story in a minute. But to answer your question, that would have been great, actually, just to have Tilda, going on her own journey without the love interest. However, my book fits into a certain genre within publishing. And so the love interest, I feel, gave it broader appeal within that. But what I had to do was find a way to get rid of him and bring him back in at the end, because he wasn't the reason that she changed. He was the result of her change.
Right.
It's when you change and do the work that she was doing on herself, you have a different experience with people, and you draw different people into your life. And I wanted him to be a reflection of that, more than anything else. And then I was in lockdown. I thought, oh, let's have some fun with it. Let's make him really rich and hot. I was
You're
single. I was trying to manifest.
You're absolutely right. Keeping your demographic in mind, I'm not sure if I would have gotten through 68 chapters if there wasn't some kind of love interest.
Yes,
Um,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it keeps it interesting, and he was a good character.
yeah. Look, I love a good love story, and I understand that this one's a little unusual because it doesn't follow the normal pattern. And to be honest, if I wrote a sequel, she might not be with him. I don't know. But I ended up coming out of lockdown and meeting some. I decided I was going to finish a novel in lockdown, and then I was going to get back out there and get on the apps, which I did. Uh, Very uncomfortable experience for me, but I gave it a shot, and I met someone who is still a very good friend, but we're not dating. But at the time, I had written all these things about Patrick. She says, I haven't even asked you what you do. And he goes, I'm a pilot, and then at the end they go hang gliding, and she talks about A380s and everything. So I put the book away for 6 months and didn't touch it. I kind of forgot what I'd written, and I went out onto Hinge or whatever it was, met a couple of people, and but then met this lovely man who I'm still friends with, but we had a romance for a little while, and he was an A380 pilot. And my girlfriend who first read it was sending, when she because I hadn't reread it, and when she read it 6 months later, she was sending circled screenshots back to me going, are you kidding? You wrote this and then you went out there and Patrick's name initially was Peter, and that's who I met. So I changed the character's name to Patrick. But I felt like I was putting something out there into the world, and I'm meditating and doing all of that, a little bit woo-woo, but I thought, okay, I couldn't write horror. I have to be very careful about what I write because I feel like there is a reflection of it that comes back into my own life. But going back to the initial story about Patrick, the idea for Tilda, the inspiration for Tilda came from an event in my life where I was misdiagnosed, but I didn't know that for 3 months, with a condition that Patrick has in the book, retinitis pigmentosa. So I was sent to a specialist. I have a very unusual pattern in my retina, and I was sent to a specialist who diagnosed me with this condition, told me that the Royal Blind Society would be very helpful for me. And then I was sent to the Centre for Eye Health, which in Australia is funded by the Guide Dog Association. And they were supposedly going to do all of these tests to tell me how much sight I had left. And that would be an annual thing. And so the scene where Tilda starts to Google invisibility, drinking in bed, dancing to disco tunes at the beginning was very much me for a few days after finding out that I was that I had retinitis pigmentosa. As fate would have it, given that this book came out of this, I made a booking at the Centre for Eye Health, but they didn't have an appointment for nearly 3 months because one of the machines was broken and they had to fix it. And so for 3 months, I thought I was going blind. And the initial thing was panic and freaking out, and then researching, and like Tilda does with invisibility. But then I started to really think about what it means to see, and if I lost my sight, how I would see the world. And I went down this rabbit hole for a couple of months, and I was already someone who was into self-development and meditation and stuff, but I really, really just went into this crazy space of these incredible research being done at universities around the world of teaching people who have been blind from birth to see through their chest, or teaching kids to see flashcards through blindfolds, or sort of trying to find where the mind's eye is, and all of these sorts of things. And so I spent a couple of months thinking about how I saw the world, and if I couldn't see how I was going to see the world then. And then I started to ask how I saw myself. One day I was looking in the mirror, and that was always a bit of an exercise in self-loathing, I guess, to that point. And I suddenly just had this feeling of, I don't know, just love for every wrinkle, every freckle, and I thought, am I not going to see myself age? Like, am I going to lose that gift? And it really felt like a gift to me, to be able to see my life and time across my face. And it was just like the world kind of shifted, really. And even once I found out that it was a misdiagnosis, and there was a completely different story to this pattern, I that's never changed for me. There'll be days where perhaps I'm, not a huge fan of what I see in the mirror, but generally, I still see aging and being able to see aging on myself as a gift. I've just got my dog here. I'm just patting him. Hmm.
Did you do most of your writing during the pandemic, or was just finishing up during the pandemic?
I'd been working on this for a
Oh.
few years. The misdiagnosis happened 5 years before the pandemic, and I'd been working on it since then, 5 or 6 years. So yeah, there was I had a quite, I guess, I had the guts of something, but I needed to sit down and work out what I was going to do with it. And I was fortunate to be, my job at the time, went, like, I was able to do that at home. So I was secure, safe. My boys, I knew where they were in their rooms. It was, it was just I'd work and then I'd write. And we had very, very long lockdowns in Australia. So I had a lot of time to do it.
So if you were to write a children's book now, having written
Mm.
about Tilda and have these experience, what would your children's books be about now? What would you want to tell a 6 or 7 or 8-year-old?
That's a great question, because you've obviously seen I have a background in writing for kids. So I do have an idea, actually, and it really is about seeing the world and how you see the world. And it would be, so both of my two sons are dyslexic, and one of them quite severely dyslexic. So he sees the world uniquely, and we in our family see neurodiversity as a gift. So, never as a problem. And it got to the point at school where I took him out for a year just to kind of really make sure he wasn't going to slip through the cracks at school, because I wanted him to understand that the way he perceives the world is unique. So I would write a book about, there's color blindness, there's, ADHD or autism, or, all of these different ways that people see the world. And so I would write a children's book about that, I think, and how every person's view of the world is valid. I've got a very big, I wish I could show you my dog. He's so big. I don't know whether you can hear the bark, but you'll have to take him in there. Yeah. I'm a total sucker for rescuing things. It used to be men, but I don't do that anymore.
Yeah,
But
it's dogs.
but I still
expensive.
rescue dogs. Yeah.
You should write that book for kids. I have
Yeah.
a son with disabilities and another son who's pretty eccentric, and could have used that book. Because
Yes.
a lot of the books that appear are not how people see through their unique lenses. It's more, so this is what they look like, and now you understand that. And no, you
Yeah.
don't, not really, but it's a start. But so you should write that book.
Yeah, I actually have a friend here in Australia who's an amazing illustrator, and we did discuss it. So I might sort of circle back to that. Yeah.
And you would need an amazing illustrator for that too. That's wonderful
Yeah.
to have
Yes.
that
Yeah,
resource.
because it really is about, how each person, how each child sort of perceives the world around. And that is that's the thing. Every single human on this planet has a different view of the world and reality. And I love that. I love that. So to somehow simplify that message as well and share that with children would be great.
Yes.
You made a little hint about a sequel. Is that something in the future?
Uh, I don't know. I've been asked that question a lot actually, and I would have initially have said no, but my life has taken such a strange turn with the death of my ex-partner while this book is out there. So, I'd written Tilda, shared it with him. Yeah, he was an academic and an artist, and so very supportive of anyone telling their story. It's their story. It doesn't matter. It didn't matter if he came off, looking like a bit of an arse in it. He was fine with that because I was sharing my story. He was supportive of that. So but 2 weeks after it came out in Australia, I was on a book tour up the east coast of the country and had a phone call saying he'd been rushed to hospital and they'd found a tumour. And so the past 18 months is, I don't know if anyone knows anything about glioblastoma, but it's a deadly brain tumour, and it changes memory, it changes your perception of things actually. And so it's been quite a journey. And then he passed away just 2 months ago. I would have said that Tilda was finished, but he gave me such a plot twist, and I talked about it with him, and I might go back to something. I don't know. Yeah, I think both myself and Tilda have learnt a lot about where you think a relationship ends and the lessons. Like, I guess I'd walked away and was promoting this book and thought, great, I've released him and that relationship and it's all done and dusted. And then he gazumped me. So
Hmm.
with another story. Yeah.
Well, you said you were working at the very beginning. You said something about working on another novel. The novel you're
Yeah.
working on now. What is, if you're willing to share, what is it about?
Yeah. So, working title is called Fault Lines. I don't know whether that will be the title, but because I feel like we're all living on one, and you just, those big shakes come and you just need to rebuild constantly. It's the story of, I feel like I've bitten off more than I can chew, but it's virtually finished. I'm about to hand it in to my publisher and they'll let me know what they think. But it's basically a family, 4 women come together because one of them is dying, and it's about the stories we tell ourselves, how attached we are to our stories, how attached we are to our past. And given that one of the characters is dying, you know, how you can shift those stories and who death is for as well. Is it just for the person who's dying, or is it for those who are left behind? So there are some big questions I've been grappling with in this book, and I'm done. Like I'm just going through a printout version of it and reading it and polishing it up to hand in. And yeah, it's very different to Tilda, but it has a little touch of magical realism in one part, and it also has that kind of fine line self-help stuff where one of the characters had written a self-help book in the 70s about attachment to stories. So we sort of weave that in a little bit as well. Yeah. I think all my women's fiction will have that element to it. Because I feel so many people are actually on their own personal journey, that it's nice to be able to read something where the character is doing that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank Jane for coming on. I'm glad that it's 11:30 a.m. there, not 11:30 p.m.
Yes, right. Yeah. I'm a night person. It's fine. If you'd said to me it was like 6 a.m., I'd have gone, oh, okay. Yeah.
And we'll be looking then to see what happens with your next book. What is the timetable? It would take you're talking a year, 2 years before it gets out there?
It will be out in Australia early 2027. So yes. And I'll see with the US if they want another book from me. So my agent will be dealing with that once she's read this draft. Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Well, thank you very much. Does anyone have anything else that they want to add before we end? Well, thank you, Jane, and we'll be in touch. I'll let you know when the recording is ready, and it'll be on our YouTube channel. We do get some people who take out the book and then can't make it, do like to go back and look at them. We'll look forward to that. Okay,
Well, Marnie, thank you very much for reaching out to me and asking me to come on, and just I've loved this format where you get to, talk to more women. Thank you for the thoughtful conversation and questions, and lovely to meet you all. Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming on.
I'll get back to my dog.
Okay.
All
Bye-bye.
right.
Best of
Bye,
you.
everyone. Thank you. Bye.